I never had time. Guess it was for the best.
If you had had a child, Elizabeth, what would you have wished for him or her?
I guess I would have wanted her to be curious. And willful, unstoppable, even. But with enough compassion to heal the world. Just a little bit.
Hi everyone, I wanted to thank ASLE for having me here for this panel on shaping values and changing behavior. My name is Todd Williams. I'm a full professor here at Kutztown University. I've authored 2 books, A Therapeutic Approach to Teaching Poetry, and more recently, Christina Rossetti's Environmental Consciousness. I've published a number of articles. My most recent one is on the uses of poetry in the video game Horizon Zero Dawn, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Please click the links if you're interested in any of these publications. Today what I want to talk about though is the pro-social and pro-environmental effectiveness of the game Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn has been widely praised by reviewers and academics for being both a feminist and environmentalist game, largely because of its powerful and altruistic woman protagonist Aloy. As a AAA game with environmentalist themes and a social justice message, Horizon can serve as a base model for video games to promote a more just, equitable, and ecologically sustainable world. In Playing Nature, Alinda Chang argues that games provide an accessible and less off-putting way to engage the public in environmental problems and their solutions. Through emotionally engaging narratives and player agency, games can counter feelings of apathy and paralysis in relation to environmental issues. By playing as Aloy and following the game's emotionally compelling narrative about environmental destruction, players become more informed about and engaged with environmental and social issues, while also developing feelings of mastery that encourage them to make a difference in the world. Aloy lives in a post-apocalyptic planet Earth in recovery 1,000 years after an almost absolute environmental disaster took place during the 21st century. She explores the open world of the game in order to uncover her own mysterious origins and those of her world, since humans have lost all previous knowledge of the past history of the Old Ones. The theme of broad environmental loss looms throughout Horizon. Aloy eventually learns about climate change and its disastrous effects on the planet during the 21st century. Though humanity bounced back somewhat during the clawback of the 2040s, ultimately the old world was all but completely destroyed during the 2060s by the Pharaoh Plague, when militarized AI robots designed by Ted Pharaoh went rogue and devoured all human, animal, and plant life on Earth. The player is encouraged to grieve for humanity in our present Anthropocene as we head towards self-destruction due to a propensity for war and unchecked consumption of the natural environment. The game is not without hope. However, Aloy learns that due largely to the efforts of Elizabeth Sobek, Aloy's mother figure from the distant past, humans were not only able to begin recovering from climate disaster prior to the Pharaoh Plague, but they found a way to eventually restore life on Earth long after the plague. Aloy is also able to save the world in her own time by being a different kind of hero. Jesus Fernandez Caro argues that empathy stands as the key feature that defines Aloy, and that Aloy regards compassion as the best tool for her project. Lauren Woolbright refers to Aloy as an eco-feminist protagonist and an intersectional heroine, in that she represents both gender progress and ecological thinking. Woolbright sees the game's message as both necessary and timely, concluding that in seeing our very extinction looming, players of the game have the chance to internalize eco-feminist ethics of care and act. Citing Catherine Isbister's book, How Games Move Us, Woolbright argues that the player's emotional connection and identification with Aloy are key to cultivating pro-environmental attitudes, and the field of conservation psychology has considered several strategic models for cultivating pro-environmental and pro-social attitudes and actions, which help to further explain the potential effectiveness of a game like Horizon. In their essay Promoting Pro-Environmental Behavior from the Oxford Handbook of Environmental and Conservation Psychology, P. Wesley Schultz and Florian G. Kaiser argue that the fundamental premise behind personal change is that individuals fail to engage in pro-environmental behavior because they lack sufficient knowledge and motivation. We need to both educate people about the consequences of climate change and make them care. Horizon Zero Dawn accomplishes both of these things. Perhaps the most useful model within conservation psychology is the value belief norm, or VBN model, developed and empirically tested by Paul Stern. VBN brings together several psychological paradigms to provide evidence for the same intersectionality that is predominant in ecofeminist theory. The VBN model shows how certain values and beliefs can lead one to certain behavioral norms. Concerning environmentalism, Stern demonstrates that the values most strongly implicated in activating pro-environmental personal norms are altruistic or self-transcendent values. As Schultz and Kaiser put it, research has shown that individuals who hold more self-transcendent values, such as broad-minded, equality, a world at peace, inner harmony, and meaning in life, are more likely to engage in pro-environmental behavior. In contrast, Stern finds that egoistic values and traditional values such as obedience are negatively associated with pro-environmental norms. Stern and G.T. Gardner discuss 4 types of interventions that can shape values and change behavior in people. 1. Moral appeals. 2. Providing education and information. 3. Incentives like rewards and punishments. And 4. Establishment of social expectations. Stern adds that by far the most effective behavior change programs involve combinations of intervention types. Horizon combines and reinforces several intervention strategies identified by Stern that can shape values and change behavior in people. It makes moral appeals for altruistic actions and for environmental preservation. It provides information about the future consequences of climate change and expanding militarization. It incentivizes the player's altruism through in-game rewards. Finally, Aloy's actions and the gratitude she receives from NPCs helps to establish altruistic social expectations. Horizon champions values in a popular medium that, with widespread repetition, will eventually bring about positive change. Aloy displays resistance to the kind of traditional authority negatively associated with environmentalism. This begins during her childhood in the Nora lands. Given her experience of being outcast simply due to her lack of clear maternal origins, it is unsurprising that she responds to the matriarchal religion of the Nora with skepticism. While her father figure Ross, despite his own outcast status, holds to the beliefs and traditions of the tribe, Aloy rejects them. When she travels into the lands of the sun-worshipping Karja tribe, Aloy displays a similar disdain for their religion, especially considering the Karja's history of committing atrocities in its name. In one scene from late in the game, Aloy even resists the temptation of becoming an authority herself when the Nora attempt to deify her.
Praise Aloy, anointed of the Nora! Up! All praise Aloy, anointed of the Nora!
First you shun me, now this? I will not be worshipped. I'm not your anointed. I don't belong to you. There's a whole world beyond your borders, whole tribes of people just as good as you. And it is all in danger.
Quest and side quest, Horizon establishes norms of altruism that are positively associated with pro-environmental attitudes. Aloy's compassion and altruistic actions are normalized and incentivized through the gratitude she constantly receives, and more tangibly through leveling up and other in-game rewards. The earliest side quest one can do in the game involves a wounded Nora named Thok who asks Aloy to rescue his daughter, Arana, from machines and recover a spear that was crafted by his late wife. Here, along with expressions of appreciation, Aloy also receives a spear upgrade. These are only two early moments that set a tone for what Aloy continually does throughout the game, helps people in need, and receives their gratitude. Also provides information about the future consequences of climate change by creating a provocative narrative about the impending disasters of the 21st century. Most of this narrative occurs through data points that the player can collect, but the most overt reference to climate change and its effects comes from the AI Cyan, who explains the world of the Old Ones to Aloy.
What kind of upheaval caused such loss of life?
There were many factors. Forced migrations, food shortages, collapsed economies, refugee crises, conflict over resources. But these stemmed from one cause: catastrophic climate change that greatly reduced the habitable surface area of the Earth.
So there wasn't enough room for people on the whole Earth?
Yes. Billions were displaced and millions perished, as much as 20% of the global population. Until the clawback.
Data points that the player collects throughout the game portray a more nuanced and detailed narrative, which begins with reports of rising sea levels and climate refugees in the 2020s and 30s. During the snoring 20s, a time when people are still in denial and reluctant to take action to combat climate change, much of Singapore's population is exiled. The Bahamas become submerged as well, followed by the Azores in 2033 and New Zealand in 2036. 2038 appears to be the peak year in terms of environmental damage, as it provides the reference point of comparison to the later Pharaoh Plague. During this year, at a relocation facility in London, an uprising breaks out and is violently put down by police. The following year, a terrorist organization, Naysay Doom, carries out a major attack of bioterrorism across major world cities. Players are provided a window into the violence and chaos that will ensue across the globe due to climate issues. Mass is another common theme of the data points. One memo to Sobek in the Zero Dawn facility refers to a die-off era from 2000 to 2043, during which 14,000 species go extinct. Even after this era, we learn that cougars and grizzly bears go extinct by 2051, and dolphins are still endangered during the early phases of the Pharaoh Plague in 2064. Of the many ominous signs of the 60s, human attitudes toward non-human life continues to prove problematic. Mosquitoes have been purposely extinguished by 2060. The game is ambiguous about this, but it shows another example of humans altering the natural ecosystem. More troubling is a media report from 2063 about plagued animals at Yellowstone Park due to biological weapons being tested on them. While bioengineering is behind the clawback of the 2040s, when the natural environment begins to recover, this human altering of the environment is not without its hitches. We hear of a documentary from most likely the 50s or early 60s about a nanotech disaster that essentially wiped out Indonesia in 2041. During the same year, we learned that the world's trillionaires are building a spaceship in order to simply leave the planet behind. We also hear of a major nuclear disaster occurring in 2051. The clawback is essentially successful, however. By the mid to late 40s, we see that cultural attitudes toward burning fossil fuels have altered when the security director at Yellowstone is criticized for using a polluting snowmobile. By the 60s, a climate refugee museum is opening, while the sea levels from New Zealand and the Bahamas have receded enough for inhabitants to return. We know that the Amazon rainforest was largely restored because Sobek specifically laments its redestruction in 2065 during the Pharaoh Plague. For all of the recovery and collectivism of the clawback, there are several ominous signs from the data points referencing the early 60s. Along with the bioweapons testing on animals mentioned above, there are incidents of continued merging corporatism and militarization. Sobek separated herself from Ted Farrow's company in 2048 when he turned it into an organization specializing in military AI. This shift would eventually lead to the Pharaoh Plague when the biofueled military robots go rogue in 2064. We also learned that by 2061, it has long been legal for corporations to run for and hold public office. Even when we learn of the submerged Bahamas recovering in 2062, we also learned that a corporation has conquered the island using more robots, ironically so they can control a resource used for clearing pollution. In 2063, police SWAT bots arrest over 500 anti-corporate virtual protesters in their homes. The social instability caused by climate disaster is shown to have far-reaching effects. What Horizon's speculative climate change narrative allows for, in addition to providing information, is an opportunity for players to envision and mourn environmental loss, which serves as a moral appeal for pro-environmental and pro-social change. We, living today in 2021, are currently in the species die-off era described in the game. And though the game was released in 2017, we are currently living through the beginning of what the game describes as the Snoring 20s, a name that is unfortunately proving prescient. As we continue to fail to adequately address environmental issues, Horizon offers a glimpse of what the consequences in the near future might look like. Environmental narratives of environmental loss, like the one Aloy discovers, are essential to motivate pro-environmental change. This is illustrated in the game when Sobek is developing the AI Gaia that will be tasked with restoring the natural world after the Pharaoh Plague.
Oh? And your assessment? Gaia?
Logically speaking, the extinction was a natural consequence.
And yet,
I find the loss of megafaunal species unaccountably sad. That they passed forever into oblivion causes me to experience a grief that is difficult to describe. Am I malfunctioning?
No, Gaia, you're not. This is good. It's very good.
Sobek understands that this emotional experience of environmental mourning is important for Gaia, who is tasked with restoring the Earth. Likewise, it is necessary for humans to value the Earth, understand the potential consequences of climate disaster, and to emotionally feel a moral obligation that motivates us to work to restore the planet. Horizon Zero Dawn and works like it can help to shape human values through emotional engagement in ways that can change human behavior toward our planet. Thank you.